I'm very excited to introduce our keynote speaker today. Dr. Alice Kim is a researcher and course instructor with a background in experimental psychology and cognitive neuroscience. She has an MA and PhD in psychology from the University of Toronto, and her current research focuses on factors that impact students' learning trajectories, including student engagement, experiential education, and the application of cognitive learning principles in course design. Alice is the founder and director of the Teaching and Learning Research in Action. It's a non-for-profit research organization which focuses on conducting and publicly disseminating research in teaching and learning. Alice is currently the associate editor of the Canadian Journal for the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning, and she currently teaches at the University of Guelph Humber in the Department of Psychology. When I first had a discussion with Alice a few weeks ago about today's keynote presentation, we discovered we had an unexpected connection. Alice commented on my guitar photo, and one thing led to another, and I realized that my sister, who runs a music school in Richmond Hill, teaches Alice's two younger children. So it is a small world, maybe even more so in a pandemic. Alice has also generously offered more of her time today, including the keynote. She and her colleagues will also be presenting a workshop later this morning at 11:40 a.m. So you can check that out as well. We are very excited to have you here today at our Spring Teaching Learning Day. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Alice Kim.
Thank you so much, Amy. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm just going to take a moment now to share my screen so I can share my slides with everyone. All right, there we go. So thank you again for having me, and thank you, Amy, and the Teaching and Learning Center at Seneca. I'm really excited to be here because I'm an educator myself. As Amy mentioned, I'm a sessional faculty at the University of Guelph Humber. And you know, we've all been teaching remotely in this pandemic for over a year now. And as challenging as it's been, I think that there were a lot of lessons to be learned. And I think that we did learn a lot of lessons. And I think as educators, as a community of educators, we could really benefit from taking these lessons with us moving forward, even past the pandemic. And I think that this is something that we should remember and celebrate as a community. And this is actually one of my main messages of my presentation today. So I also want to thank all the attendees for being here today. I know that you probably have a million things that you could be doing, so I'm so appreciative that you're here. And I want to actually take a moment to check in with all of you to see how you're feeling this morning. And I wanted to use this emoji meter. So basically, I'm going to send out a poll, and you just have to pick which image best reflects how you feel right now. And I will share the results with everyone so we all have an idea of where we're all at this morning. Oops. So as I'm fumbling here, you can pick which one that you want to choose. I'm just looking for the polling option. Oh, there it is. Okay, so you should see the poll on your screen now. Don't worry, no explanations needed, no justification. Whichever emoji best suits your mood right now, I'd love to know where that is. And maybe I'll give maybe 30 more seconds, and then I'll share our results. I can see what's coming in. I don't think that you can yet, so I'll just hold off on saying anything. Okay, 2 more seconds. I think, yeah, no more moving. So there we go. Okay, so I'm going to share the results, and we're all across the board. It looks like most of us are at number 4. I can't say that I can interpret these emojis the best, but I think that's like a neutral face. We have some really happy people, so lots of 5s. We have some 3s, I get that. Yep, and we have some 2s. I don't know how to verbalize that one, but I use that one a lot myself. And then we have some maybe goofy moods going on. So that's good. I'm going to stop sharing this. So, my background is in psychology, and I think it's just been ingrained in me to think this way. Like, I think when I do my own research, I think about individual differences as well as overarching commonalities across everybody. But I really appreciate, usually it's the latter, I have to say, but I really appreciate the individual differences, because obviously we all have different circumstances. We're all dealing with different things right now. And obviously this morning we have a lot of that going on and different things impacting how we feel. So I appreciate the individual variability here. And it actually ties into my next slide here. You probably have heard about this analogy a lot during this pandemic, but it resonates with me, so I wanted to share it. That is, we're all navigating the same ocean, but in different boats. And so I align that with, well, I usually think about my students when I say this, but all of us, we're all navigating the pandemic, like the same ocean, but we're all in different boats because of our different circumstances and individual contacts. And so that's how I align it to the different boats. So really the point is that even though we're all navigating COVID-19, our experiences of it are very different. And it's not just our students, right? When you think about your teaching, it's also us as educators and as people too. But one thing that is common to all of us, again, the overarching commonality here, is that we're all people, obviously, and we all have needs. We all require our needs to be met. We all need to do some self-care. So that, I'm going to be talking a lot about self-care today and why it's important. And I hope that by the end of the session, we're all on the same page. And if not, we can maybe have a chat after. But I am going to bring up this here. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs. A lot of you probably already know about this, like maybe you've studied it, or maybe you teach it, or maybe you've just heard about it. But I think it's something really important to keep in mind, especially during the pandemic, when we're all more vulnerable to burnout. Because of all the added responsibilities we all have, not just in our teaching and our careers, but in our personal lives as well. And there's also additional pressures and stress that come with being in the pandemic. So I am going to be revisiting Maslow's hierarchy, what we see here again and again, because I think it's a good reminder. And I did study memory for in my graduate work, so I know that the repetition is going to be helpful. So I will spend just a bit of time on this. Essentially, in this hierarchy, we have different types of needs. We have from our most basic needs at the bottom all the way to the top where we reach self-actualization. That's the top level where we can be the best that we can be. We do our best job when all of our other needs are met. And so at the bottom, what we see is our needs, our need for air, our need to breathe, right? Our need to sustain ourselves by drinking water, eating food, sleeping, all that stuff. And then next comes the safety need. So only after we've met our basic needs, we can move up to the next level, which includes, our security, our health, resources, employment. And then next after that comes basically relationships. We're social creatures, humans, right? We're social beings. We need to have relationships. So that's important to us. And then once we've fulfilled that need, we can move on to esteem, which includes things like freedom, self-esteem, and status. And then at the top pinnacle is when we reach our level of being able to do our best, right? Being our best self, essentially. And so the important thing to keep in mind here is that this hierarchy goes in order. You cannot just take like a snowball and throw it at this whole triangle and it's all done. You got to go one at a time. So the physiological needs first, basic needs first, then the safety needs, and then up, up, up. So that's something to keep in mind. Obviously, I think we can all understand why it's important. I think we all agree that it's important to engage in self-care. But the question is, why do we not all do it? I'm going to talk about this later. But I just want to say we don't do it. I think as educators, we don't do it. That's why there's such a high level of burnout. And I'm painting broad brushstrokes here. Obviously, some of us do, but just on average, a lot of us don't. And so why is that? I don't know, but someone sent this to me, this little saying here, and it really resonates with myself. So I wanted to share it. I have this sneaky feeling that maybe it resonates with a lot of people attending here today, at least to some degree. Anyways, what it says, when we've been conditioned to believe our worth can be measured by our productivity, resting can feel terrifying. Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I mean, when I talk to my colleagues about things like taking time off or taking a break, I don't know, like the conversation usually ends up, the conclusion is usually we all have so much to do, and it's nice to think about taking time off and taking a break. But it seems like it's low on the priority because we have so much that we need to do right now, and it's super urgent. And it's more like a wish list kind of thing. So I don't know. I'm not saying that this applies to everyone, but it applies to a lot of people I know. And I think that we belong to the same community. I think we may have some similarity here. Um, so I think that, and I really like working on this presentation because it just solidified what I'm thinking. But I really think that we need to recondition ourselves or reframe how we think about rest, and taking breaks and self-care in general, because it's not something we should feel guilty about. I think the way that we need to frame it or recondition ourselves is that we need to take breaks, we need to take rests, we need to take care of ourselves so that we can help others better, so we could be better educators, so that we can do our jobs better. Because I think that most of us are really just thinking about all the things that we have to do so that we can do our jobs better. But really what we need to do is first take care of ourselves. So a lot of the research is also, like, I'm not just saying this because this is what I feel, it is what I think. But when you turn to the research on self-care, well-being, productivity, efficiency, the overwhelming message is actually you're going to do a better job. Like, you're going to be more productive, actually, if you take a break. Like, I wish I knew this during grad school because I never took a break. But anyways, the message here is that when we take care of ourselves, we do our work better. And you know what? We actually also increase the longevity of our careers. We can do better work and for longer because, think about it. We don't burn out. We stay healthy, right? And so again, I'm going to bring this back to Maslow's hierarchy because it just ties in so nicely. Like we take care of all our needs, and then we stay at that point or that level where we can continue doing our best job again and again and again because we're taking care of ourselves consistently. So I want to spend a moment talking about mindfulness. The reason I want to bring up mindfulness is because it comes up a whole lot in the well-being and self-care literature. So mindfulness is moment-to-moment awareness, being aware of what's going on in the present, being mindful of just not what's going on in your head, but that ache in your back or that dryness of your throat even, and a lot of other stuff, just being aware. And not surprisingly, it has a positive impact on our well-being. I don't think that this is surprising. I think this is something we generally know. It's negatively correlated with all the bad stuff like stress, negative affect, anxiety, and burnout. It's positively correlated with all the good stuff, like positive affect, self-compassion, sustained attention, all good things. And what I think is really interesting, what I think is important to remember is that mindfulness, why it's so good, it helps us become more aware of our need for self-care. In hindsight, it makes sense. Everything makes sense in hindsight, but in hindsight, this makes sense because when we're in the moment, moment to moment awareness, yes, we can be more aware of the things that we need to do ourselves, to take care of ourselves. And I think that's a key point that we need to remember. I actually saw this in action in my own students, actually, in their reflective journals. It was amazing to see what they came up with spontaneously. And I do want to share some of their excerpts right now. So just a little bit of an introduction. So Amy mentioned that I am an instructor at the University of Guelph. I think I mentioned it myself also. This past term, I taught a course. It's a placement course in psychology. So their students, they work with external organizations for 100 hours. It's related, because we're in psychology, it's all related to psychology. So, there was a student working at CAMH. Students are working at private clinics, old age homes, call-in centers like certified listeners. It's kind of like Kids Help Phone, that kind of thing, so that they do that on a volunteer basis. And it's really for experience of applying psychology to the real world. But anyways, the point is, as part of the course, students had to keep this reflective journal, and they had to write in it throughout the semester. And what I found was that, they got better and better. I mean, that's the main, anyways, they got better and better in critically reflecting on their experiences. The journal is not a journal about their life. It's about their placement experience. So something that spontaneously came up was their realization that they need to take care of themselves so that they can do a good job at their placement. So let me just share with you. This is an excerpt from one of the students' journal. I'll read it out loud as well. I noticed that when I'm not eating well, I'm dehydrated, and I haven't gotten enough sleep. It affects my mind and how I treat people and how I carry out tasks, making the work that I output at the organization poor. I'm more irritable, I miss details, I'm getting tired quickly, and I forget tasks, which isn't good traits to have when you're trying to help others. So 1 second, sorry. So this is something students were not prompted. I never spoke about, I should have, but I didn't talk about Maslow's hierarchy. Students just spontaneously came to these realizations themselves. And I was so impressed, actually, and very pleased that they were doing so, just by taking that time to reflect and becoming aware of, their status or their state and what was going on with their placement. Another example here is, I realized that because I'm doing my placement, which involves helping individuals, I should be more mindful about my stress, ways to relieve stress, and ensure that too much stress doesn't stay in my life for long periods of time, so that I do not get too overwhelmed here. I cannot continue with the task for the organization. So again, this spontaneously, this realization or this awareness that, I need to get my stress in check because I want to do a good job. I want to continue working for this organization, and I want to make sure that I can do the best that I can possibly do. So I thought that was really telling about the importance of taking breaks. Not just that, actually, the importance of being aware of ourselves and taking time to do what we need to not fix ourselves, but take care of ourselves so that we can be high functioning citizens of society, basically. So all this to say, if you feel like you need to take a break, then please take one. And I'm saying this to myself too. I'm not saying that I'm good at this, but I believe that this is what we need to do, because we all know there isn't anything productive about burning out. So I want to do my second poll now. I'm wondering how many of us have felt burnout, like whether it was this last year or not. Have you been burnt out before? Do you know what it is? Is this making sense? Let me send out that poll. There it is. All right. Whoa, lots of burnout. I don't know if you can see this. I will share. I'll give you 30, 40 seconds and then I'll share. But wow, yeah. Okay, I think we're done here. Okay, so overwhelmingly, I'm not surprised, because this is totally in line with the research I'm going to talk about, but I'm not surprised. Most of us have experienced burnout. Some of us have not, and I'm really happy for that 7%. I think I didn't vote, but I would say yes for myself. And there's some maybes, yep, and then a couple who are not sure about what burnout is, but we can talk about that for sure. We're going to talk about that next, actually. So yeah, all the more reason, right? All the more reason to be taking these breaks. So burnout. What is burnout? Well, I will say firstly, it's related to isolation and loneliness. Isn't that, I don't know, given our circumstances, our pandemic situation, I think that's something to keep in mind because a lot of us are, let's say, working from home, not interacting with others the way that we are used to, or maybe we're used to this now, but like before the pandemic. Yeah, we'll get back to that. Burnout is manifested in different ways, but some of the main ways is through emotional exhaustion. Like I think you'll know when you're burnt out, you're gonna know. You're gonna know. Lack of personal achievement, lack of productivity, just sheer exhaustion. Yeah. As I was saying before, there is a high prevalence of burnout in educators across the board, not just higher education, but there's a high prevalence in our community of higher education instructors. And there's even one study that showed across geographical locations, like not just North America, like across the world, more than 20% of university professors have been reported to suffer from burnout. And, maybe there's even more than that hasn't been reported. I don't know, but they say 20%. And so I am not surprised. I don't know, like based on my experiences, based on people I know, I am not really surprised about this. And the question I throw out is, could this be exacerbated by the pandemic? Because again, the isolation, I don't know if you're feeling lonely, but the isolation, the added responsibilities, switching to remote delivery was a big thing, I think, for many people. It wasn't super easy to do that. And then continuing this way. So I think that the need to support educators, especially during the pandemic, has been recognized. I think a lot of people see, the burnout that's happening or the potential burnout. So we have things like this. So this was curated by the Society for Teaching and Learning in Higher Education, or maybe you refer to it as STELI. And the website, this is just a screenshot. The website is actually keepteaching.ca. It's a great website. If you have not already frequented this website, please do check it out. It's really good. And so on this website, you're going to see a section for well-being resources. And I would recommend that you check it out if you haven't already. Like maybe you already know this, but just in case, just sharing this here. And I'm happy to make these slides available in case you want to keep all these website addresses for later. And so, this is super small print. You're not supposed to be able to read it. It's basically, if you were to click, I'll go back. If you were to click here on Wellbeing resources, I just wanted to give you an overview of the stuff that you would find here, just, in case you're interested or not. Here we go. So, some general information for students and faculty, like, why am I so tired? Well, you might be burnt out. I don't know. Well-being in an online environment. Some more stuff here about being remote and online. This is a course that you can access. This is a free Coursera course offered by U of T about managing stress and mental health. Pretty good to check out. It's 90 minutes. And it's delivered by Jordan Peterson. No, not Jordan. No, sorry. The name escapes me right now, but check it out. You can check it out through Stelly. And then some more resources on stress and, I thought I remembered the person's name. No, sorry. More resources on stress and mental health resources. Some stuff about meditation, virtual digital experience. Okay, so we have some stuff here about fitness. So Fitness Blender allows you to customize the type of free fitness video you want. So lots of good links here. And of course, they have stuff for family and friends, socializing, cooking, financial. So they talk, it's just curate all these things that you probably would be helpful. And then movies and films. I'll let you check that out. They do have an infographic that I will show here. So it's just like this quick kind of cheat sheet thing here. And what I circled here is things that you can do or ideas for self-care. And basically all of the things that they list here aligned with what we saw or the general levels of Maslow's hierarchy. So nutritious meals, exercising, sleeping, they say limit screen time, yes, social interactions, and meditation. So these are just some suggestions of things that you might want to look into doing if you're not already engaging in these things. And again, just to bring you aware, another website that might be good in terms of resources for educators' self-care is resilienteducator.com. And they have stuff here about meditation and mindfulness, stress and resilience, rejuvenation and refresh. And I know that you probably have access to a lot of this stuff. So I'm just throwing it out there. This is kind of catered more towards educators in general. So you may want to check it out, or you may want to stick to what you're doing. So all this to say is to do whatever works for you. I mean, integrate whatever aspects of self-care works for you in your life, essentially. So I like this post because it kind of, well, it contrasts, the hardcore, heavy-duty checklist of self-care things, and then I think on the right side is more what I would do. It seems to me as a lightweight, more reasonable in terms of what I can integrate into my daily life. Like I feel like I can open the window as I'm doing the work. I can drink some water as I'm doing my work. I don't have to dedicate, a block off time to do, things that you might want to do on the left side. So again, all this to say, I think that the message here is do whatever you can do whatever works for you, as long as you are meeting all of your needs. So with that, yes. So I want to do a little bit of a reflective activity here. Excuse me. I want us to all spend a couple of moments to think about, like explicitly, consciously think about what have we been doing to care for ourselves. You can say over the past whatever timeline, like the last year, month, week, and also what do you want to start doing to take care of yourself? And I think we need to be explicit about these things because, by being explicit, we bring it to our conscious awareness. And again, it's all about being aware, right? Being aware of what we want to do, what we need to do, we're more likely to do it. So let's spend maybe just one or 2 minutes thinking about this. If you wish, you can actually share. You don't have to, like this can be something you keep to yourself, but if you wish, you could also actually share some of your ideas and your thoughts by annotating the screen. And I do think here, let me just make sure. I'm gonna hide the names of annotators. So if you do annotate, it should be totally anonymous. And you can do that using your annotation tool. So if you go, for me, it should just be in your menu bar as annotate. So why don't we take 1 minute or so to do this little activity. So maybe 10 more seconds, and then we will continue moving forward. Okay, so why don't we continue? I hope that you did find some new ideas about things that you may want to start doing to take care of yourself. And maybe we can share it later on or during one of the breaks. So I do want to bring it back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And what I want to highlight here is this section or this level of love and belonging, because it's so important to have those connections. And I think as educators, it's kind of, it can be very lonely, even if you're in a class of hundreds of students. It is still a bit like you're on your own there in a sense, right? So I think it's really important for educators to have connection with their colleagues and other educators and their community for that support, right? Because as educators, we can support each other as educators. So I think that, of course, the Teaching and Learning Center, they're the ideal space and place and resource to form these connections with other people in our community. I can say this firsthand as I spent a couple years as a postdoctoral fellow in a teaching and learning center. So I know firsthand it's really like tons of resources, a great space, and like everyone, all the people are amazing. So I would reach out there. I mean, they provide the support online and in person. But given our pandemic kind of situation, I wanted to talk a little bit more about online communities, just a bit. So, there's already been a push, even before COVID-19, things were moving online anyways. And there are some benefits. I mean, I will talk about the benefits of the online communities. Firstly, the first point, individuals from anywhere in the world can connect, because now it's not a matter of having to commute or be in the same physical space. We can connect online. So that's amazing. I've found that actually, that I'm now connecting with people from different countries and continents now more than before, because I'm doing more online things. Online communities, another benefit, scheduling constraints. So a big thing about meeting in person is finding a time, or even synchronously, right? A big thing is finding a time that works for everyone. But the good thing about online communities is that you can communicate asynchronously or synchronously. And I think that the mix of the two works really well, and that the asynchronous component really helps because, if you can't make it for a certain time window, you can still follow up at a different time. So the conversation keeps going, and it's just more inclusive that way because more people can participate. And as I mentioned, there's already been this kind of movement towards online. Higher education institutions already have the technological setup or architecture to support online communities. And, we see these platforms being used for things like professional development for faculty. And in that sense, it forms communities as well. And another thing that I think we should all keep in mind, I think we're all kind of tired of Zooming and even the other ways like Microsoft Teams meetings, all of that. But something to keep in mind is that educators are motivated to join online communities, like maybe not for all things, but the good thing about this is that they actually do, like educators do reach out to seek online communities because they're looking for all of these things like camaraderie, sharing emotions, combating isolation, and exploring ideas. So in many ways, I think online communities can really help us even further. And I think that this is something to really keep in mind because whatever we do now will probably, at least in some way, transfer over to when we're through this pandemic. I think a lot of people agree that we probably won't go back to doing things the way we did before. Hopefully we do meet more in person, but I think that there are the good things we can carry over with us. And definitely the isolation of teaching, I don't think is going to go away. So maybe we can try to think more about the use of these online communities to help us out a bit. And so, I mentioned that this is not something new. The use of online platforms is like pretty expansive. Like today, like here are some examples. Today we're doing an online conference. I know that all of you, everyone here, we know about online meetings, like all the Zoom meetings and Teams meetings and all that we do. These three, I don't know how much everybody has been involved with these, but I think that these are pretty helpful, like online social groups. I know that one of my colleagues from York University, for example, she's a teaching stream professor, and she arranges these once a month meetings for teaching stream faculty at York. And it's just a social gathering where they can connect with each other because obviously they have a different experience and they can support each other and socialize, and a lot of relationships and friendships are created and formed and supported in that way. We also have use of social media, like social media specifically for our community, I think is super helpful. And I will turn to that in a moment, but also online supports for teaching. I already showed a couple websites, well, for Wellbeing, but there are others as well. So for social media, that I do mean things like Twitter and Facebook and all that stuff. And, a lot of people cringe at social media, but it can be helpful in some ways. So the case study that I want to point out is the Learning and Teaching in Higher Education chat. And it goes by this hashtag LTHE chat. So if you are on Twitter, or maybe if you're new to Twitter, this is their account. And basically, they host a weekly community chat on Twitter. And each week, the organizers pick a different topic. And I, personally, there's a lot to be learned in these chats. There's always a brief overview, like they have a little blog where they will introduce a topic and they may provide some additional readings. But during the discussion, there's actually a lot to be learned because you have so many different voices. I mean, this is an international chat. I will get to that because people across the world are meeting to discuss this topic. So you get so many different perspectives, and each week is different. The fact that it is each week, so my third bullet point here, the fact that it's each week, you become familiar with the people who come and who participate each week, and slowly you form new connections. I know that like a couple of my best colleagues, I would say my best colleagues, I met them through this chat, and they're just phenomenal people or individuals, and I wouldn't have met them if I did not participate in this. So another thing that I will mention about this is that it's synchronous and asynchronous. I mentioned that on my last slide because you'll see here the chats are from 8 to 9 p.m. UK time. So at that time, they will throw out a question. You have to follow the hashtag, like you search the hashtag, and you'll see that they release a question every 5 minutes or so, and you answer the question, and people respond to each other and the question, and that goes on for 1 hour. But if you happen to miss this chat, you could always follow up later. You search up the hashtag in Twitter, and it's more like an asynchronous conversation where it just keeps on going until it stops, basically. And so you have an opportunity to see what the questions were, what the responses were, and you can still respond. And when you respond, whoever you respond to will, of course, receive notification of your response to their question. So something worth checking out if you are interested in being part of something like that. And it's actually really fun. It's fun. Okay, so online supports for teaching. I mentioned already a few for well-being. I just want to point your attention to the general site. So again, keepteaching.ca. I know I showed this to you, but I just want to point out it's not just about well-being. This website, so again, this is from STELI, Society for Teaching and Learning in Higher Education. And this is just a screenshot of their website. But again, it's not just on well-being, it's about all things. You can see an archive of webinars that are super helpful. Like if you haven't checked them out, like I would definitely check them out. And there's some stuff here for teaching and assessing online remote. It's meant to be for teaching during the pandemic, essentially. So do check that out if you haven't already. And again, I did mention resilienteducator.com. I want to point your, I want to bring to your attention this course that you can access through resilienteducator.com. I think this one is also 90 minutes. Yeah, 90 minutes. And so it's actually offered by an organization called Share, but you can access it through this website. And it provides strategies to help teachers and their students remain strong during the pandemic and beyond. And I thought, what this website, I will say, is not specific to higher education, but there are a lot of things that you can take out of this I think that we can all take out of this for our own teaching. And I like the emphasis here, strategies to help teachers and their students remain strong during the pandemic and beyond. So we can already see here, as educators, I don't know how aware we all are about this, but I think at the heart of it all, like all of us are so concerned about our students. I mean, maybe more concerned about our students than ourselves. And I think it just, like the way that things are marketed towards us, it just shows this kind of sentiment, right? So I want to pivot now and talk about, just briefly, how instructors are extending care to their students, or how they've been doing that. And I want to do that by sharing some of the data or passages that I've come across in this study that I've been working on. It's an autoethnography. Basically, when we shifted to remote delivery, I myself and some of my colleagues who were teaching at the time, we got together with some of our student partners, and we said, let's work on this autoethnography to document our experiences of the shift to remote learning and teaching, and also continued throughout the term using this delivery. The student partners, they weren't in our courses, in case you're wondering. They were in different courses. So basically, we wanted to co-construct a narrative of our experiences, and it was really fascinating. Each individual wrote down their reflections, like their experiences. Everyone read each other's reflections. Students read students, as well as instructors' reflections. Instructors read the reflections of other instructors and students. We all responded to each other's reflections. And then we did this multiple times throughout the year. So at the beginning of the shift, this is what one of the instructors wrote. And I think it just, really shows how much intention, like how much care and thought went into this shift. Like everyone thought it was rushed, right? But it was still thoughtful, I think, on the part of many instructors. So the instructor says, I need to be mindful that many of my students do not have the luxury and privilege of solely being concerned with being a student. And now the COVID-19 crisis places even greater stressors and demands on their lives. So for me, it's that understanding and the I would say empathizing with students and trying to understand what is it like for them. They're not just students, they're also people dealing with many things. So we have to understand that this is a time where we have to be extra compassionate, let's just say, right? In terms of how we interact and communicate, how we design the course as well, right? So one more passage. Before switching over, I asked my students to get in touch with me if they did not have reliable internet access in a place where they felt safe, or if other environmental factors were impacting their ability to proceed with the course. So again, just remarkable. Like I was so touched to read all of these reflections because it just shows the intentionality, like how much care and thought actually went into this really rushed switch over or transition to the remote delivery. And I think it's very telling for instructors like this. Okay, I'm speechless right now, but I'm going to move on to share some of the student experience. So what did the students say? I will say we did not prompt anyone to talk about these kind of things. It came out. These things came out. So students, let's set the context. One student wrote, I feel as if my home has become my study spot, my cafeteria, my social setting, my place of relaxation, my space of work. My home has become everything I do, and that can feel suffocating to not have an escape. And I will say that this was a very popular sentiment across all students, across everyone. This applied to all of us, really. But setting this context, I want to say what did the instructors actually do to support their students? Like what were the actions that they took? We know that the intention was there, the genuine care obviously there, right? The understanding of what is going on, yes. So how did they translate this into their actions, how they delivered the course? So one instructor wrote, the way I facilitated class was reviving and enriching my materials, making them self-learning based, adding lecture notes in PowerPoint, adding explanations on answer keys, providing self-learning video, links, sites, offering step-by-step instructions, explanations on Blackboard, and so forth. So really trying to give the students as much autonomy, I would say, in terms of their learning, because the synchronous, I think we're just being sensitive to students' different circumstances and perhaps their time schedules. Another instructor wrote, I communicate with my students frequently. I send at least one email to the entire class once a week. I send an individual email to a student at least once every other week, but it can be more frequent depending on what their needs are. If students wish to meet virtually, I set up appointments via Zoom as well. So really being in touch with the students not being a stranger, having a constant thread of communication, I think it really helps. It really helped a lot. And also following up individually too. I think the class announcements are really good, but the individual emails are very helpful as well from what I've heard. Okay, so here another chance to just spend a minute reflecting on your own practice. So what are some ways you showed care for your students? And again, what are some ideas that you want to try out in the coming terms? So let's just take a moment to think about that. And again, I do think it's important to be explicit about things. If you wish to share, that would be great. You can use the annotate feature, but there's absolutely no pressure at all to do so. So I'm going to put the timer on for 1 minute. Okay, hopefully that was an okay amount of time. I am going to carry on in the interest of time of our scheduling, but this doesn't mean that you can't stop, that you can't continue after the session, reflecting on your own teaching practice. So very briefly, I want to share some more findings of another study that I worked on with my colleagues. And basically it was, again, about the student experience here, not the instructors. So we asked students to but complete these bi-weekly reflections, starting from when courses started to be delivered remotely. So at that point, that's when they did their first guided reflection, I will say, and then every 2 weeks until the end of the term, they continue to do so. And we asked some specific question this time. So I don't know if everyone has heard about the critical incident questionnaire, Brookfield's critical incident questionnaire. Essentially, it's used by instructors to collect formative feedback about anything, about any aspect about the course. And so all you really need to know for this is one of the questions asks students to identify what they found most helpful or affirming up to date. Any actions by anyone in the course. This could be the students, like their peers, administrative staff, or the course instructor, anything that anyone did, what was helpful or affirming for them. So across 4 reflections, so that would be across 8 weeks, these are the main themes that arose on this slide. So I will go over them just briefly first. So learning resources. Instructors provided materials that supported students' learning. Students really, really appreciated that. That was popular, and it came across, like, it was a popular theme across all 4 reflections. Updates from the instructor were very much appreciated, also very popular. So here, instructors send out updates about the course and the institution's response to COVID-19. Students look to us to provide them with more information. They want to hear it from us too. They receive information from the university, but they expect us to kind of echo and highlight the important points for them. Students appreciated asynchronous course delivery. So basically not having the course delivered in real time. Variety of comments were added to that. For example, unstable Wi-Fi, having to share Wi-Fi during the day and just not having enough bandwidth to tune into the videos essentially, or having a very distracting environment where students can focus during the day with all the younger siblings and pets and parents working. They actually worked at nighttime at like 3 a.m. because that's when they could focus. Students also highlighted clear and organized style. So they really liked how their instructor made work easy to follow, clear explanations and organization of the course content. And another one is student cooperation. So students helping each other and answering each other's questions, participating in class discussions and activities. And so, from this, we can see a lot of what students found most helpful was as a result of actions of the instructor. Most of this was under the control of the instructor. And even in terms of student cooperation, that's something that we can do. We can design our courses so that they're more conducive to student cooperation. We can set up these kind of activities or contexts where students will more naturally work together and help each other and participate together. So my session is coming to a close, and one message that I do want to leave is that when it comes to connecting, everybody wants to connect. We connect by caring. That's what I would say. It's not the number of Zoom hours, right? The number of hours you spend on a screen with someone. If you don't show care, if you don't have that genuine care, and you don't show care through your actions, you're not going to connect. So, if we put this in terms of doing a study, if we were to do an experiment, I would hypothesize that, how close or how connected you feel with another individual is not positively correlated with how much time you spend with them on Zoom, but more how much genuine care the two of you share for each other. And that's definitely something that we can do for our students and our colleagues. That's super important. And I hope that we're all on the same page when it comes to how important it is to care for ourselves so that we can care for others as well. But I have one more thing to say. That probably sounded like the conclusion, but I have one more thing to say in 1 minute. And basically, I want to talk about where we go from here, because, right now, or maybe this past month, or, at some point when you feel super motivated to, put into practice like these self-care routines and make sure you take care of yourself because you want to be that top level, best person, best teacher, educator that you can be. There's something else you need to do, because you can't just feel motivated and start doing things at that moment. You have to, I ask you to take an extra step, because when you're highly motivated, this is when you can do difficult things. And what you need to do, here it is, you need to think about the future. Because when you are at this peak level of motivation, I should explain this first. So, we obviously, there's a graph here. The x-axis is time. So we go from left to right, time increases. Motivation is on the y-axis. And we can see here, whenever this line is motivation too, right? Across time. So whenever you are at this peak of motivation of saying anything, but specifically self-care, this is when you want to put something in place, like some kind of plan or some system to make sure that you stay on track, even when your motivation falls. Because you can see it's inevitable. At some point, if your motivation is high right now, at some point it's going to be low. The question is when, but it's going to happen. And we call that the trough. So right here. And when you're at this low dipping point, the trough, that is when you're most likely to quit, right? And it could be that diet, it could be anything, but it doesn't matter. This is when you need to have something in place so that even when you don't feel like doing it and you have very low motivation, you still do it. So I will say, as an example, if your goal is to become less sedentary, to become more active by taking a walk in the morning, because that's the only time that you'll definitely do it because your day is super busy, you're better off getting a buddy, for example. Think about a neighbor, a loud, bossy neighbor who is going to expect you to be on the street at like 6 a.m. To go on this brisk walk with them because you made a plan. because in the beginning, when you start this routine of getting up early and walking, you're highly motivated. You're going to do it. But again, remember, at some point, you're going to lose the motivation is going to drop. And when you're at this trough, it's a lot harder to say no to that bossy neighbor who's going to get really, give you some grief if you don't show up, versus if it's just yourself. If it's just yourself, it's easy to say, not today. But if you know that someone is waiting for you, you're more likely to go. So generally, you want to make yourself accountable to someone or something to make sure you stay on track with whatever your goal is, even when you hit this low point. So with that, now I will let you go. And I will just say thank you so much for listening. And I have to also say that I'm always interested to hear from educators about their teaching experiences, anything new that you're trying, like new techniques or strategies. So if ever the occasion should arise, please don't hesitate to contact me. And I have my information up here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alice. That was really fantastic. We enjoyed it a lot. And we actually have some questions here in the Q&A. Is it okay if we have some
Sure.
time now to ask you? Okay,
Sure. Okay, I'm
great.
looking into the
Okay, super. So just going to start with one, which is sort of a question, but also an observation. One of the participants noticed that in their experience, students don't really book private online office hours, even though they're really readily available online. And instead, they hold open Teams meetings and find that is really sort of a better option for people to drop in and just kind of meet there. What do you think about that? As
I agree. The same thing happened to me as well, actually. I did the exact same thing where I don't know what it is, but first half of the semester, nobody would come. Like nobody wanted to meet. And then I started just holding these drop-in hours. You can come with your friends if you want, really keeping it open. And then my 2-hour office hours turned into 4 hours. I mean, that's because I let it. I was happy to do that, but then it just students came streaming in, and I don't know, like maybe they like to have someone there with them. I think for me though, when that switch happened, half of the semester had already gone by, and I think it took some more time, like more time than usual, to make that connection with my students where they felt comfortable possibly coming to speak with me. I know that students have had a rough time. It's been a rough year for them, and I think that they had just some experiences that have thrown them off, and their motivation level was quite low. Like they told me themselves, and I could tell because I know some of these students as well. But I think it's just constantly reaching out to students and letting them know that you hear them. Like one thing that I think that helped is that I did this CIQ, so this check-in, this formative feedback check-in. How are you finding the course? What are you finding helpful? What are you not finding helpful? Like what is making you feel distanced with the course? And what's confusing? And then not just taking that survey, but addressing it by changing, for myself, changing some elements of my course. So changing some of the activities that we were doing. Some of them were not meeting its purpose, so let's get rid of it and focus on the activities that are helping. And I think that helps students feel heard and encourage them to actually reach out as well. But I love the idea of having this open drop an hour kind of session, because I find for myself, for whatever reason, it helped a lot, and students came rushing in. And once I started speaking with the students on that personal level, the course just got so much better. They just, I saw the effort going into their, all of their assignments, but even their reflective journal writing, I saw it. Like they were reflecting way more critically. Like that was the thing, like trying to get them to the level where it's just not a superficial reflection or even a mediocre. They got really good, and I think it's because there was just I think that they saw that I wanted them to do well, and I was willing to help them, and then they started helping themselves. I don't know if that answers the question, but I will go back and say I do. The drop-in, like open office hours, I think helps a lot.
Great. Yeah, thanks. That was a great question from Tim. And Kevin, do you want to take the next question, or do you want me to?
Uh, Sure. Yeah, there's another question here, Alice, and I'm just looking at the time. I noticed that we're moving right along and there's some questions coming up, but maybe we can just have one or two more questions. Is that okay?
Sure.
So it's an observation, but a question coming out of it is that noticing that many international students are relying more on their smartphones and on social media things like WhatsApp, that sort of thing. So faculty just asking about how do we navigate that space? How do we use social media to our advantage, perhaps? How do we set our courses up so students can access through smartphones? Any suggestions around those types of things so that students feel more connected?
Yeah, that is such a great idea, and it's something that I've just started thinking about. I can't say that I have any great insights about that. I wish I did. Um, I'm a little uncomfortable using WhatsApp myself, but I haven't really explored that space. That's something that I would love to discuss further, though. The only thing that comes to mind is the asynchronous component where but that doesn't really answer the question about using mobile devices. Yeah, no, I think that's an excellent question, and I wish I could say more about it. I actually don't have much insight into that. But please contact me if you do. Please contact me if you do.
Thanks so much. And I'm sorry to put you on the spot there,
No.
but I think a lot of us are all struggling. How do we use some of these social media tools to our advantage? But thank you for chiming in on that. Over to you, Ellie.
Okay, another question was this. Sometimes some educators can feel like burnout can result from not actually seeing students in the class anymore, even online, but just little boxes with their names on it. And they really don't have that personal connection anymore. So I guess it's almost like a two-pronged question. On the one hand, any suggestions to make, a social connection, and also perhaps even to increase attendance, as they know that the recordings are just going to go out. So, why attend? They can just see the recording later in their own time.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think that there's so many layers to that. I think there's a lot of things to think about. There's a lot in that question because there is a perspective of course, I'm a big proponent of face to face. Like I really love the face to face delivery, and I find it much easier because I really rely on my students' feedback, like not their verbal feedback, but their faces and their body language. And so for me, it was really tough switching over because I didn't even see any squares and anything like that. And at the beginning, I thought that this was the worst. It's so hard to connect. But as the year went by and I started to do this research into students' experience, like I came to realize that for them, it's a huge thing to turn their cameras on. That's the first thing. I know that's not what the question was, but then their schedules. Their schedules is just a lot of my students. They're like superstars. They juggle so many things. It's not just about doing school. They're providing childcare. They're working. They're actually going out to work and helping their families, right? So what I keep in mind is that I try not to get offended if they don't show up, because what I keep in my mind is that they're juggling tons of things. I think they're juggling more things than me personally, even. So I try to keep that in mind and just, what I try to focus on is what do I need to do to support them. I know my students' situations, and I know that maybe they're not typical undergraduate students. They have some more added responsibilities. So given what I know about my students, what can I do to make things easier for them so that they can still learn the material and pick up that knowledge that they need for their next year's courses. And so I think the best thing to do is to think more about the student's perspective. And it's okay, like I've kind of swallowed that pill. Like it's okay if I feel not as great as I usually do when I teach face to face, but I feel really good when my students reach out to me and they say, thank you so much for doing it this way, because it's so much easier for me. Like now I can participate. And a lot of what I do is asynchronous participation. So instead of raising your hand in class and saying something, it'll be like discussion questions or reflection questions that you write on your own, and then you submit, and you still check in with them. Like you can still see where students are at when you ask them to do these offline asynchronous types of activities. And I think that a lot of students appreciate that, because that's the biggest thing. That and checklists. Like I will say, using the checklist in the LMS, because another thing is that students are also bombarded with this remote delivery. This is something that's new to them as well, and they're extremely tired. Like I think just as tired as all of us are, and they've just easy for them to lose track of time. Like they're taking 5 courses. All of us, we're all asking them to do these little activities. They're losing track of what is what. So using that checklist in the LMS of what they need to do for each lesson, so many students love it. They just love it. And it's because that they have this guarantee where they just check off everything that they need to do. I'm not a big fan of checklists, but it helps them stay organized. And included in that would be, do your reflection questions, do your participation questions. And I think that these kind of acts where you show that you're really thinking about the students and accommodating them, it seems to work. And then they just reach out. I think they connect with you after they see that you were actually legitimately trying to help them. Then they come to you and they connect with you, and maybe they'll show up more. I don't know. It might just depends on who your students are and what their situations is. And I think that's the best that I can say, really.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Those are fantastic ideas. Do we have, I'm not sure, Kevin, do we have time for one more, or are we already over time?
I think we're over. There's so many questions here that we could
Sorry.
ask Alice, and we're just running right out of time. So maybe we can compile them and send them out to Alice later on.
Yeah.
And then in the meantime, I'm going to pass it over to Arushi to thank Alice for her presentation this morning.
Thanks, Kevin, and thank you, Dr. Alice Kim, for giving us your time today and prompting us to think about connection and care as really valued parts of our practice. I know that these important elements often get pushed aside in the busy day-to-day, and now more than ever, we need this reminder, and there was lots of positive feedback coming through in the Q&A this morning as well. So one of my takeaways quickly will be to reconcile with this often counterintuitive idea that self-care is an essential part of productivity. And you've highlighted that so well for us. And I invite our participants here to take a moment before moving on into the rest of your day to reflect on what your takeaways are from this morning as well. So thank you for encouraging us to think about this.